for the stream to fire up across the internet. If you're not familiar with the program, we do multi-stream, which means we broadcast on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and so on. And we just like to take a quick couple seconds to make sure that we're alive and cracking. And it looks like we are online across the board. So let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful, sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped to represent thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our criminal justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes they have some difficulty doing so themselves. So that's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers, so that together we can shine the big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon that very justice system. That's why we're so grateful that you are here and with us. Today we've got a lot to get into. If you've been following the channel for this week and really for the last 6 weeks, since the November 3rd election, we've been talking a lot about the election issues. We're going to get back into some of that today. We have a new report from Peter Navarro, who is a part of the Donald Trump administration, detailing what he's calling theft by 1,000 cuts. So he did this 23-page report, I think, something to that effect, that has a lot of detail about what their insight is to how they think this election was fraudulently stolen. It's their report, not ours, but we are going to go through it. We're also going to talk a little bit about what's happening in Congress, because right now we have sort of this ongoing issue of whether or not there's going to be a senator who's willing to join somebody in the U.S. House of Representatives to challenge the electoral votes when they are ultimately counted on January 6th, early next year, in the House of Representatives. So I want to give you a little bit of an update on what is going on. We've got Senator Tuberville, we've got Representative Mo Brooks, some new statements coming out from them. But we really want to start off the program diving into this SolarWinds hack, which is much more than the SolarWinds hack. This is something that is becoming much more widespread. You could even call it systemic. It is just spreading around into a number of different facets of American government, and not just American government, throughout the world. This is being called the biggest cyber attack, this biggest cybersecurity breach in the history of the world, because of the magnitude of the breach. It's sort of interwoven itself into all of the major government agencies that you and I all know about, and it's certainly concerning. Now, this is something we've been talking about here. I have really been trying to see what the rest of the media has to say about it. A lot of it has been largely anti-Trump. A lot of it has been sort of ignored to some degree, and it kind of blows my mind. I think this is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, story of the year, all said and done. And I mean that even outside, beyond coronavirus, any of the George Floyd stuff that we saw. I mean, we've seen a lot this year, but this is something that is really, really catastrophic. And so I want to spend some time breaking that down. So before we get into it, quick reminder, let's go ahead and have you subscribe if you're not already, because we go live at this time every day of the week. We want you to be a part of the conversation. We would also appreciate a nice share, a thumbs up, invite a friend or a family member to come join you on the next program. That would mean a lot to us. I am going to go through the slides. They will be available for you at the end of the program in the Discord server, which is where we have conversations. It's a live chat that happens before and after the show. You can chat with us, of course, on YouTube during the live stream. But if you want to carry on after the show, head on over to the Discord server. You can get a copy of the slides. You can also grab a copy of my free book. And one more thing, throughout the program, if you want to send in a question, if you want to send in a super chat, Miss Faith, who is right there in that office behind me, she is going to be taking screenshots of those, throwing them into the slides, and we'll address those at the end of the program. So don't feel like you have to wait till the end to do that. She is clipping those, and we will address those as they come in. So let's get into the material. I wanted to start with SolarWinds. This is a new article that came out from Microsoft, and not just Microsoft. This is the president of Microsoft. He is saying this is an ongoing hack, and he's calling it well, let's take a look at the article. So this comes from TheVerge.com. He's calling it not espionage as usual. He's saying this is something that is not espionage as usual. So the standard traditional spy sort of thrillers that you think about, this is way bigger than that. He says he sounds the alarm about the ongoing hack and identifies more than 40 precise targets. He warned that the wide-ranging hack of SolarWinds Orion is still ongoing, and this is an attack that is remarkable for its scope, sophistication, and impact. The breach targeted several U.S. government agencies, and it's believed to have been carried out by Russian nation-state hackers. He says here, quote, "It represents an act of recklessness that created serious technological vulnerability for the U.S. and the world." He says it's not just an attack on specific targets, but on the trust reliability of the world's critical infrastructure and in order to advance one nation's intelligence agency. He says the weeks ahead will provide mounting and we believe indisputable evidence about the source of the recent attacks. And what Microsoft did, if you're not familiar with Microsoft, you know that they have a whole range of different software, a whole suite of different pieces of software. One of those is antivirus. And if you are a Windows user, as we are here, as I am personally, they have Windows Antivirus Defender, and they have all sorts of platforms, that help secure their systems. They have major business backends. Many people use it just for Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, but many people don't realize they have an entire infrastructure set up for major businesses, right? Major Fortune 500 companies and so on. And so they are coming out, they're doing a sort of a top to bottom scrub of their entire infrastructure. And one of the things that they did is they put together this map that I want to show you that looks like it's identifying where some of this hack, some of these vulnerabilities, the penetration has occurred throughout the world. And when we flip over, you can see it's widespread. Largely, it's in the United States. When we take a look at the United States, we see hotspots over in Texas. We see it in Southern California. Of course, over in the Washington, New England area, we've got a lot around. It looks like Pennsylvania, Washington, probably the D.C. area, some stuff in the Midwest. And, some stuff actually it looks like right in Georgia, which is the subject of a lot of the litigation kerfuffle that's been going on these last 6 weeks. Now, some other interesting things when you look at this map, it is kind of everywhere else in the world. We have some spots, looks like over in Great Britain, in Germany. We've got some going on over in Australia. We have viewers in Australia and Switzerland and so forth. Even in China, we see this area over here looks like it's in Beijing, maybe a little bit down here in Shanghai. And the one country that is not affected at all, from what we can see here, looks to be Russia, right? I don't see any blue blips in the entire country of Russia, which, who knows what that actually means or not. That could mean that we just don't have good data from Russia. Maybe they don't report, they don't interface with any of the Microsoft suite or any of those things. But, this is Microsoft data. It's their security analytics, and we can see it. I mean, this is a global breach. This is in software. This is in hardware that is spreading all throughout the entire country. And the second thing that I noticed when I was looking at this map is, what does this look like? I mean, it kind of reminds me of a virus, literally, spreading around. We've seen maps looking like this in the COVID age, in this whole, year of where are the hotspots, what look like, red hot areas where some other areas are blue. And it's just, what a weird year that we have an actual human biological virus, but we also have this kind of a separate digital virus, and both are catastrophic for the entire country. So it's kind of the perfect storm. We also have an election where we're talking about fraud and hacking and manipulated servers and all, we've been all of these issues are sort of converging together. And today there's been a lot of information about the Department of Defense now sort of halting the transition for the Biden administration. And Donald Trump met with the Department of Defense today in the Oval Office. And so we're going to break all of that down, but we wanted to just give you a little bit of a backdrop. That Microsoft article goes on, and it says here approximately 80% of those customers are located in the U.S., but Microsoft also identified victims in Canada, Mexico, Belgium, Spain, the UK, Israel, the UAE. It's certain that the number and the location of victims will keep growing. Earlier on yesterday, Reuters reported that Microsoft had been hacked as part of the breach and that it also had its own products leveraged to further the attacks on others, but Microsoft is denying those claims. They're saying our investigations, which are ongoing, have found absolutely no indications that our systems were used to hack or attack others. And as it goes on, it says SolarWinds, which is the main company. So as a quick refresher on this, if you're not familiar, the way that this hack was originally discovered, or I would say originally operated, was there was this company called SolarWinds, which had hardware and software that they would use to help other companies manage their tech stacks. So everything that they do, their entire technology operations would interface with the SolarWinds products. And SolarWinds was the victim of a supply chain hack. So what happened is a legitimate component was basically bundled into the SolarWinds software, and it looked legitimate. It didn't look like a virus. It didn't look like somebody was hacking in. This was something that they wanted in their software. They put it in. It went through the formal global distribution channels, and then that's how it infected everybody. And so now SolarWinds is taking the step of hiding its high-profile list of clients from its website. The list included 425 of the Fortune 500, and Microsoft is now coming out and saying we need a more effective national and global strategy to protect against those very cyber attacks. And so, the response largely has been a little bit scattered this entire week. We first learned of this earlier this week, and a lot of these alphabet agencies haven't really said much about their response. We have a clip here from the acting director of the Department of Defense, and lawmakers on the Hill are really debating these things. Many of them are calling this an act of war. I mean, this is the level of severity that we're talking about here. When we go over to this article from the Hill, we'll see it was written by Maggie Miller today, early this morning. It says lawmakers are raising questions about whether the attack on the federal government, widely attributed to Russia, constitutes an act of war. The hacking may represent the biggest cyber attack in U.S. history, and officials are scrambling to respond. And that is an understatement. Largely, everything we've seen from the government thus far has been, we don't really know. We're still investigating. They don't have a lot of answers for us. The response is further complicated, of course. Like I said, this is a perfect storm by the presidential transition. President Trump has not yet commented publicly on this. We haven't seen it, and the U.S. has no clear cyber warfare strategy. We go over to Dick Durbin, who where was he? He said, we can't be buddies with Putin. He said, this is virtually a declaration of war by Russia on the United States. We should take this seriously. That comes from Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin. And so, you're starting to hear these rumblings of war in Congress over this cyber attack. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, it is that serious. It says our national security is extremely vulnerable. That's according to Mitt Romney. He was on Sirius XM today. Hackers believed to be part of a nation state have had access to federal networks since March after exploiting vulnerability updates to IT Group's SolarWinds Orion software. It compromised a number of different agencies, including the Treasury, State, Homeland Security departments, and branches of the Pentagon, though it is expected to get worse. On Thursday, we talked about this yesterday, the Energy Department's National Nuclear Security Administration, which maintains the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile, was also compromised. And, this is it's just massive. Mark Montgomery, who's a senior fellow over at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, said that he compared the state of the U.S. cyber defenses to the unprepared state of the U.S. healthcare system at the beginning of 2020, and advocated for both Congress and the incoming administration to do something about it, largely pointing to Joe Biden in the hopes that he'll be able to, do something about this stuff. Under the Trump administration, both the White House cybersecurity coordinator position and the State Department's cybersecurity office were eliminated. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency was created in 2018 to fill that gap, but it's currently without a Senate-confirmed leadership. Now, that was because Director Christopher Krebs was fired shortly thereafter the election. If you don't recall this, the CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, was led by this guy, Christopher Krebs. After the election, Donald Trump wanted the narrative to be electoral fraud, presumably because there is a lot of electoral fraud. And what happened was Christopher Krebs told him, no, that's not something, that I think happened. And Donald Trump presumably fired him. Now, that is the standard media narrative, but we don't really know what the true story is there, right? Christopher Krebs was in charge of CISA, and apparently since March, they have had access to whoever these attackers are, whether it's Russia, China, whatever. They have had access to major infrastructure in the United States for a long time, for months, basically since the same time that coronavirus started back in February and March. So maybe there's a different reason why he was terminated, and it doesn't have to do with him not, adhering to the same narrative that Donald Trump wanted. We don't know yet because Donald Trump has not given us a clear statement. Biden on Thursday, yesterday, vowed to make a response to the attack in cybersecurity generally a top priority. Once in office, members in Congress today were talking about the need to sign this National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. This is the same bill that Donald Trump has said that he intends to veto. Remember, this was the incident where Donald Trump wanted Section 230 added to the bill. It was passed, I think, in both houses, or I think it's still maybe working its way through Congress. But he said, I'm going to veto that bill unless you include the Section 230 stuff in there, because he's considering Section 230 to be a compromise of national security. And if you don't recall, Section 230 is the idea that you can eliminate some of the liability that or eliminate some of the liability protections that are afforded to a lot of the social media companies, Facebook and Twitter, and all of them. Essentially, they're saying Donald Trump is saying they've been censoring us, they have not allowed us to express our freedom of speech and so on, and so he wants that included in the bill. But a lot of people in Congress have been saying, oh, what does Twitter censoring you have to do with national security? So this NDAA, this National Defense Authorization Act, has been sort of stonewalled a little bit, and Donald Trump has been repeatedly saying that he is going to veto it, but we don't know if that is going to happen now in light of this new revelation about this massive hack. One of the immediate steps that the administration can take, according to this article, is to improve our cyber posture by signing the NDAA into law. They're calling it must-pass legislation, but saying this cyber incident makes it even more urgent that the bill become law without further delay. This is, Ms. Faith took a screenshot of what the bill looks like. The sponsor is Rep. Adam Smith, who looks like he's a Democrat from Washington. This was introduced back in March, going through the House Armed Services Committee, and the latest action, it's presented to the president. Yeah, so that was on, it looks like December 11th. So presumably that is on President Trump's desk. We're going to see whether or not he ends up signing that. It looks like if we follow the tracker, it was introduced, passed the House, passed the Senate, resolved the differences. So in reconciliation, then that went over to the president. It's on his desk. And, he met with the Secretary of Defense today. They may have discussed some of that. The bill, if you want to break down the bill, contains a lot in there. You can see this bullet point, just the 2 pages here. First, we'll run through a couple of them, but authorizes appropriation, so that means money, to the Department of Defense for research, development, testing, evaluations, procurement of aircraft, weapons, more money for the Defense Health Program, the Armed Services Retirement Home, and of course, the Space Force is going to get funded as a result of this bill. Also, military personnel, healthcare, matters relating to COVID-19. We've got DoD organization and management, strategic program, and so on. So this is a really, really big bill, and they want to pass that through expeditiously. But Donald Trump has indicated, I think at least twice, if not more than that, that he is not inclined to pass it if it does not include the Section 230 revisions, and it looks like it doesn't. We don't see that in the bill anywhere. So we're going to see what happens now with the president. Now, Catherine Herridge, who's been doing a great job on a lot of this story, she has access. I don't know how she gets this access, but she's pretty amazing. Catherine Herridge over at CBS_Herridge on Twitter, she posted this. She said, SolarWinds hack new. The Department of Defense, quote, to date, we have no evidence of a compromise of the DoD from the Director of Defense Information Systems Agency. Tuesday, Acting Secretary of Defense Miller told CBS about securing the systems and about a preliminary assessment. So let's watch what he had to say. And you really get kind of a non-answer out of this guy. She's going to ask him, have they been compromised? And he says, we don't have anything definitive on that. So you would expect them to say, nope, we know our systems are secure, everything's fine. He's like, good question, Catherine. We're looking into it. Let's listen in.
The SolarWinds hack where the Defense Department networks compromised.
Looking at it right now, don't have anything definitive. Obviously very concerned about it and looking into the matter very closely.
You're still doing a damage assessment?
Yes, absolutely.
What steps are you taking to secure the Defense Department networks?
We have standard operating procedures in place that are very refined when intrusion is noted or a potential intrusion so that we can monitor our networks and counteract
But at this
anything.
point, you've not seen evidence of a
No,
compromise?
Okay, so no evidence of a compromise, but nothing definitively saying we were not compromised. So they are scrambling over there at the DoD, trying to come out and do a little bit of damage control. I mean, a lot of people are sort of, ears are perked very firmly now because of the idea that maybe they hacked into the nuclear codes, and that's kind of a big deal. So everybody is on high alert, and he is out, Chris Miller, saying, we're still doing a damage assessment. We're looking into this thing. But we did know today something weird happened, right? A lot of these things are very coincidental. Let's break down some of the coincidences. We have today was December 18th. It is December 18th. This is the day that Trump's executive order that he drafted in 2018 that authorized all of the intelligence community in the United States through the Director of National Intelligence to run audits on how they interpreted foreign interference in the elections. That was supposed to take place right after the election occurred, and a report report from all of them. So I think it was from the FBI, CIA, I mean, everybody, the Secretary of Treasury, we have Department of Justice, and I think 5 or 6 other agencies, Homeland Security and so on, were all supposed to do their reports in the last 45 days. The report was supposed to be due today. It's not here. We talked about this yesterday, but they're kicking it into January, it looks like. And many people were sitting around going, okay, cool. We've got a report due today. We want to know really what the intelligence community has to say about the election, because largely they're silent, right? We don't hear from them about almost anything. Anytime there's an investigation into somebody, FBI says, we have no statements. We can't talk about it. It's a pending further investigation. And so we were all waiting around on today saying, what is the report going to show? What does the intelligence community have to say about all this? And it got kicked out. And we're going to see what that looks like in January, but that's just one coincidence. We also have another coincidence. The Department of Defense was meeting with Donald Trump today. We have a screenshot of his public calendar. So they met in the Oval Office. No press was included. We also have a strange sort of about face. Previously, a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the transition, Biden transitioning in. The GSA, the General Services Administration, had not authorized him to start the transition. Then he was authorized. And so presumably the transition has been underway. But today we just got notice that the acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, the guy that we just heard from, is he's stopping the transition. Now, they're going to sort of walk that back a little bit, but this was a scoop posted this morning from Jonathan Swan over at Jonathan W. Swan on Twitter. He says, scoop, via Mike Allen, acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller ordered a Pentagon-wide halt to cooperation with the transition of President-elect Biden, shocking officials across the Defense Department, senior administration officials tell Axios. And this article details a little bit about what happened. It says that acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller ordered the halt, and there were meetings between President Trump's team and the Biden team that are going on throughout the government after a delayed start to the administration when Trump, according to this article, dragged its feet on officially recognizing Biden as president-elect. But then on Thursday night, late last night, Miller, who was appointed on November 9th after Donald Trump fired Defense Secretary Mark Esper right after the election, Miller ordered officials throughout the building to cancel scheduled transition meetings. That's a big deal, right? They're scheduled and he cancels them. And Biden's team, they didn't know anything about this. So Biden transition director Johannes Abraham contradicted the Pentagon's official response to the story today on Friday afternoon, telling reporters, let me be clear, there was no mutually agreed upon holiday break. In fact, we think it's important that the briefings and other engagements continue during this period as there's no time to spare. That's particularly true in the aftermath of the ascertainment delay. They're referring to Trump, to the delay in recognizing that Biden is president-elect. Miller said in a statement that at no time has the department canceled or declined any interview after the mutually agreed upon holiday, which begins tomorrow. We will continue with the transition and rescheduled meetings from today. A senior Defense Department official sought to downplay the move, calling it, quote, a simple delay of the last few scheduled meetings until after the new year. We had fewer than 24 remaining meetings on the schedule today and next week, the official said, adding that DoD staff working the meetings were overwhelmed by the number of meetings. These same senior leaders needed to do their day jobs and were being consumed by transition activities with the holidays. We are taking a knee for 2 weeks. We are still committed to a productive transition. Does that sound like a bunch of BS to you? Because it certainly does to me. This idea that they can't sort of do their work and transition at the same time, that's their job. That is part of their job. The transition is part of what they do. Presumably, if they've been there at this department for longer than 4 years, they've done this before. They did it back when they were transitioning from Obama to Trump and even prior to that. So this isn't new. They knew that this was coming. They knew that, how to prepare for this. It's just like if you work at a shopping mall and it's Christmas time, you hire more employees because you're going to be overwhelmed and bombarded with holiday shoppers. Same thing here. They know the transition is coming. They presumably have enough employees to conduct a reasonable transition, and they're not doing that. So if you're a Joe Biden person and you just got cut off and they're saying there was nothing, look, we had no agreement with this. We had stuff scheduled. You saw here by the DOD's own admission, there were, looks like 24 remaining meetings, and those are now scheduled. That's a lot of meetings. They weren't just rescheduling a lunch or something like that until after the holidays because they couldn't squeeze it in. There was a plan in place. They are deleting the plan. They're using the holidays as an excuse. Why is that? because there is something big that is happening in Washington. We don't know what it is yet, but there's something going on here, and I just don't buy that excuse. Oh, we're just a little overwhelmed by the number of meetings. We need 2 weeks. We're going to take a knee for 2 weeks and come back. I don't buy it. And we know that there's more going on. The president met with the acting Secretary of Defense today. You can see here, this is from factba.se. So fact-based, they have a nice little interactive sort of website where you can go in there and see a lot of publicly available information. They do a nice job consolidating it, so I would go check them out. But the president at 3:30 today met with the acting Secretary of Defense in the Oval Office, closed to the press. So, many people are wondering why Donald Trump hasn't made a statement. I don't think he knows what to say. I mean, I don't think that the intelligence community knows what to say. I think that they're still in the thick of it. They're still trying to assess what really happened and then put together a plan. And if the president doesn't have anything to say, I would probably presume there's a good reason for that. If they're talking about an act of war, if they're talking about a breach this catastrophic, you got to have your T's crossed and your I's dotted before you come out there and start throwing around public statements, right? And Donald Trump, I think we all know how he likes to communicate. We all know he likes a little bravado and braggadocio, and he likes to go out there and do those things, but he turns it off when necessary. I think he's turned it off here for good reason. We haven't seen anything out of him, which leads me to believe it's probably quite serious. He's not out there saying, he's not tweeting about this, right? Which makes me believe there may be something significant there. So we're going to follow that along and see where it goes. We're going to change gears. Now let's sort of talk about something that's kind of related. We don't know yet, but the election, right? One of the main claims this entire election, or at least regarding the election litigations, claims from Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, and a number of others have been about hacking, has been about this idea that the Dominion software was compromised, or some of the electoral systems, or even voter registration, databases, everything was compromised and exploited by somebody. And now we're starting to see that there was a massive national security breach. Another coincidence. So Peter Navarro came out and posted an article, summed up an article, and he says this was death by 1,000 cuts. The election litigation, the election fraud, according to Peter Navarro, was theft by 1,000 cuts. A new report detailing massive fraud plaguing the 2020 election alleges there was widespread theft by 1,000 cuts strategy across 6 dimensions and 6 battleground states. This report cites comprehensive evidence and blasts the media for its failure to cover the matter. Peter Navarro, who is the White House trade advisor, says that there was a coordinated strategy to effectively stack the election deck against Donald Trump and the Pence ticket in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I want to just show you what this guy did. This is actually pretty brilliant. I kind of wish I had thought of this, but he sort of put all of the different states on a spreadsheet, like basically a chart, all the states across the top row, and then all of the different issues that were found in those different states into this beautifully organized chart. I love charts. I like nice colors. I like looking at a lot of data on one simple slide. Let's do that right now. So this comes from Peter Navarro, and you can see across the top we have Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Then on the left column, going down, we just want to identify which states had, quote, outright voter fraud, which ones had ballot mishandling, which one had contestable process fouls, which one had equal protection clause violations, which one had voting machine irregularities, significant statistical anomalies, and so on. And you can see here, there's a lot of red check boxes. So Arizona had looks like 5 of the 6. Georgia had all 6. We had Michigan that had 5.5. Nevada had all 6. Pennsylvania had 4.5. Wisconsin had almost all 6. And they're just going through and they're sort of showing you how pervasive this stuff was across a number of different states. And we've talked about basically every one of these, voter fraud, about people voting twice, people voting after they've moved out of state. We have ballot mishandling. We saw a lot of that when we talked about chain of custody issues, the contestable process fouls, seen some of that in the ballot adjudications, the equal protection clause. These are some of the legal arguments that we've been analyzing. The idea that if you get to vote twice, or if your vote counts for 2, and that means my vote counts for half. If you get 2 and I get 1, that really means that my vote is about half as valuable as yours because you got double the amount of votes. And so, those were all equal protection claims. Voting machine irregularities, we've seen those ad nauseum. We've seen statistical anomalies across the board. We've analyzed and talked about Dr. Shiva here. There's a ton of those different claims. And so what he did is he just kind of synthesized it all into one nice chart. President Trump leads were reversed by a flood of mail-in and absentee ballots, according to this report. You can see here, Trump led midnight on 11/3, but then Biden lead on 12/15, almost, 6 weeks later. So on election night in Georgia, Trump was up by massive numbers. In Georgia, 356,000, Pennsylvania, 555,000, in Michigan, 293,000, and in Wisconsin, 112,000. And then after 6 weeks go by, they all flip. Biden takes the lead in every one of those jurisdictions. And we talked about this on election night. We did a 5-hour live stream on this channel, and we were following along with the numbers, and it was looking like Trump was running away with this thing. But if you remember, the narrative was already set by the media and by the Democrats largely before the election. Remember, they were talking about the red mirage. You can Google that and you'll see a bunch of articles about that. They were warning, saying there's going to be a red mirage. So on election night, Trump's going to win, but then shortly thereafter, the mirage is going to fade away and you're going to see that this was really a Biden victory. Even though a lot of the rules were changed at the last minute. Pennsylvania was still collecting ballots 3 days after the election. I think North Carolina was 10 days after the election. Ballots were still coming in. There was stuff coming in after the fact, after the polls had closed. The whole thing was a mess. And so this article goes on and says, at the stroke of midnight on election day, President Trump appeared well on his way to winning a second term. The Trump-Pence ticket had substantial and seemingly insurmountable leads in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. If these leads held, it would be a decisive victory for Donald Trump. It would be 294 to 244 in the Electoral College. But after midnight, a flood of mail-in ballots and absentee ballots entered the count. The Trump red tide of victory began turning Joe Biden blue. As these mail-in and absentee ballots were tabulated, the large leads in Georgia suddenly flipped. President Trump was ahead by more than 110,000 votes in Wisconsin, 290 in Michigan. Georgia, whopping 356,000. Pennsylvania, more than half of a million votes. But by December 7th, they all flipped and Trump lost those states. So the report, it continues. It says, we're looking at other forms of fraud. So according to this other chart, there was outright voter fraud, and they break down the types of voter fraud, including large-scale manufacturing of fake ballots, bribery, dead voters, ballots cast by ineligible voters such as felons, illegal aliens, ballots counted multiple times, illegal out-of-state voters. And you can see here, once again, it's sort of spread out and identified in each of the individual battleground states. Arizona has a lot of them. Apparently, there's evidence of bribery, fake ballots being manufactured, ineligible voters who voted in multiple states, dead voters, ghost voters, illegal out-of-state voters, and so on. And you can see they're just sort of saying that they are identifying widespread evidence for those check marks, but those asterisks are some evidence, right? So they believe that it's widespread evidence for many of those check marks. Navarro goes on. He also alleges that there was ballot mishandling via a lack of adequate voter ID checks, signature matching abuses, backdating of ballots, a broken chain of custody, and so on. Identifies where those are happening. We've got those happening in Georgia. Signature match check abuses, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania. We have a broken chain of custody, unauthorized ballots, unauthorized handling or movements of ballots. They're saying widespread evidence of this stuff in Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, some evidence in some of the other states. And it just continues to go on and on and on. Now, this is a lot of the stuff that we've covered. We've talked about basically all of this stuff. Abuse of poll watchers, observers, allowing improperly registered people to vote, illegal ballot curing. That happened in every one of the states. Abuse of poll watchers and observers, ballots cured by poll workers, and they were doing it in a way that was contrary to the law in every state. They're saying we've got widespread evidence of that. Equal protection claims across the board, every single state, every different type of equal protection claim. We have the machines that were used to conduct the election. We're seeing that there were large-scale voting machine inaccuracies in Arizona, Michigan, Nevada. We've got inexplicable vote switching and vote surges in favor of Biden. That's in Arizona, Georgia, and Michigan. We've got statistical anomalies infecting all of the different battleground states. we're seeing that again. Arizona, excessively high turnout, at times exceeding 100%. Same situation in Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Wisconsin. It just goes on and on and on. And like I said, we've covered a lot of these different lawsuits. We've explored, like we were saying, we like to take some of these electoral fraud claims, pull them off the shelf, open them up and examine them, and sort of exercise the mind to see if some of that is legitimate or not. And the idea that there is zero fraud, no widespread fraud, no systemic fraud, no narrow focus fraud, that this whole thing was done by the books, to me just doesn't seem logical. I think there's enough evidence there that we can have a conversation and you can reasonably conclude that this election had some pretty significant issues. Peter Navarro goes through and he says, we've got some concluding observations from the findings of this report. It is possible to infer what may have been a coordinated strategy to effectively stack the election deck against the Trump-Pence ticket. If not steal the election, then the goal was to strategically game the election process in such a way as to unfairly tilt the playing field in favor of the Biden-Harris ticket. According to the Texas complaint, which the Supreme Court did not hear, the goal of this strategy was to flood the battleground states with millions of ballots to be sent through the mail or placed in drop boxes with little or no chain of custody. And this is what we were talking about even before the election. Okay, many people who are a part of the channel now weren't with us before the election. And before then, we were talking a lot about this lawsuit stuff. A lot of legal actions were initiated by the Democrats in a number of different states, all citing COVID-19, all with the hopes of changing the election rules at the last minute. We saw this around the country, and you can go look it up if you'd like on the SCOTUS blog. They have a 2020 litigation tracker over there, or just go back on our channel and look at some of our videos. We were talking about the Pennsylvania case before the election. We were talking about how Michigan and Wisconsin were changing the rules before the election, and we were speculating or theorizing, why would they want to do that? Is it really because they're concerned about little old grandma who's not going to be able to, go out because of the lockdown and go vote? Or is it because there was some strategic advantage to winning the state if they had these rule changes? And now we're seeing there were some strategic advantages. They wanted more people to mail in their votes. They wanted less restrictions and regulations on absentee ballots. And all of the rules of the game were changed at the last minute that opened the door, that provided an opportunity, a point of insertion to go in and take advantage, which makes total sense. They got the lawyers to do the heavy lifting for them and change the rules. Once the doors were unlocked and wide open, they just slid in there and took full advantage. The key takeaways, according to this report from Peter Navarro, it says, the weight of the evidence and the pattern of the irregularities uncovered in this report are such that it is irresponsible for anyone, especially the mainstream media, to claim that there is no evidence of fraud or irregularities. I agree with that. I think there's a lot of evidence. They may not think that it's particularly good evidence. They may not like the evidence, but it certainly exists. In refusing to investigate a growing number of legitimate grievances, the anti-Trump media and censoring social media are complicit in shielding the American public from the truth. Would also concur with that one. It goes on, it says, those journalists and so on, if they conduct the appropriate investigations to determine the truth about the 2020 election, if this is not done before Inauguration Day, we risk putting into power an illegitimate and illegal president lacking the support of a large segment of the American people, which, regardless of what you think about the voter fraud, whether you think this election was fraudulently stolen or not, I think that this is an important point. Many Americans do. If Joe Biden got 80 million votes, congratulations to him, hats off to him. There's still about 74 million other Americans who just don't buy it. There's a large part of the people who voted for Joe Biden who also don't buy it. We've seen a lot of public polling that we've talked about here. Something like 30% of the Democrats also think, wait a minute, he won? How did that happen? Nobody really can kind of wrap their head around it. And those who do, they don't really want to talk about it. They just want to get rid of this stuff. So that's what we've been seeing. The courts also have been refusing to hear a lot of these cases on the merits. We're seeing a lot of the litigation being dismissed on laches, mootness, standing, ripeness, all sorts of different standing claims that are just, in my mind, manufactured because they don't want to hear the evidence. They don't want to bring this stuff into the court of law where they have to issue a ruling because courts don't want to disenfranchise votes. They don't want to step on political issues. You can look this up. This is a legal concept. It's called a political question. If you bring political questions to the courts, they just say, hey, that's not our business. That's a political issue. Go take that back to the legislature. Go take that to the people. Let them vote on it. Let them decide. And so the courts have been I would say, abdicating their responsibilities in many ways. They're just bailing out of the process. They're saying, oh, That is touchy. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to dismiss that on standing, on latches, whatever nonsense they want to make up so that they don't have to get into the weeds, which is unfortunate because we need some guidance on this stuff. We need to know, what does the Supreme Court say about this? Can one state sue another? Apparently not. Apparently there's no standing. So equal protection goes out the window for some of those votes. In Texas, you can go and vote. Your vote, if you believe Texas runs their elections cleanly, your vote counts for one vote. But your vote is a little bit unequal than somebody else's vote in Michigan, because we can't be certain whether or not that person, or let's say Wisconsin, we don't know whether that person is who they say they are, because all you needed to do in Wisconsin, if you were indefinitely confined, which was automatically extrapolated to the entire population, we don't know if they are who they say they are, because you can go and register to vote without providing identification. Just go onto a website, upload your stuff, you're good to go. That's concerning. That means that other people might be getting multiple votes, which essentially dilutes your vote. It's an equal protection problem across the board, and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to investigate it. The courts are just hands off on this stuff. And if you don't think that this is going to happen again, really? You don't think that the Republicans are going to play this game also? You don't think that they're going to just latch onto this and we're going to run into the situation where each side is trying to outfraud one another and our election system is going to become entirely illegitimate if it hasn't been seen that way already? And what's the answer? Well, the Congress people don't seem like they're going to do much about it. They're sort of mustering some energy up. Let's talk about Mo Brooks. We've been talking about Mo Brooks over from Alabama on this channel for some time, because in Congress, there is a little bit of momentum towards challenging the electoral votes when they're cast on January 6th. Recall that we've talked about this, where even though a number of, well, actually, I think all the states have cast their electoral votes, those are all in the process of being transmitted from the states over into the United States House of Representatives, over to Congress. Until those votes are counted through a formal process and the final announcement of the tally after it's being counted by the tellers and it's handed back over to Vice President Mike Pence, who is the president of the Senate, he pulls out the ticket and he announces who the next president is. That is when, according to the rules, it's decided. That's when the next president is officially the president-elect, according to the rules, at least one interpretation of the rules. If you look at, many people would say that it was the date of the certification, which was on December 14th, earlier on Monday. But technically, until that happens, until those votes are read and the announcements is proclaimed, from my reading of the rules, you can make a very good argument that January 6th is the official date. So in order to challenge that, when those votes are being counted, both houses of Congress can challenge those. And in order for a challenge to one state's electoral votes, in order for that to be effective, you need both one House of Representative member, you need one senator. They need to come together. If you have one from each house, then they will basically break for a debate about whether to count those electoral votes. So if Pennsylvania comes up and Mo Brooks from the House of Representatives and somebody else from the Senate, if they agree we're going to challenge Pennsylvania's votes, we don't think that they were gathered legitimately, and they want to contest that, they'll break off into a debate. They'll come back. They'll have a floor vote in both houses. And if both houses agree to basically dismiss those votes won't count. And if that happens, the theory is you could get Joe Biden underneath 270 electoral votes, which is what he needs to win. If he is under that number, because the states throw out the votes, or I'm sorry, the House and the Senate throw out the states' votes, then that would trigger a contingent election, and the House of Representatives would vote for the president on a one vote per state. Because the Republicans have more states, they would win the presidency again. That's one pathway forward for the Trump team. It's a bit of a long shot, but there is momentum going on now. Mo Brooks here from Alabama, as I said, posted this on Twitter yesterday. He said, 18 House colleagues join me in sending a letter to the Senate Majority Leader and to Speaker Pelosi and various House and Senate committee chairs seeking election fraud hearings ahead of the January 6th Electoral College vote. So it's not a real substantive letter. If you read it, you're going to see that basically all they're asking for are further hearings, investigations, and so on. But you can see all the different signatures here from all of the individuals. These are all House representative members, some of them from Arizona. We have Representative Andy Biggs, Mike Rogers from Alabama. We got Rep. Gosar from Arizona. We got David Rozier, Ted Budd, and so on. Others from all around the country. It looks like Tennessee, Texas, and others. And what they're saying here is Mo Brooks is saying under the Constitution and the federal statutes, Congress is responsible for resolving all federal election contests for president, the Senate, and the House. Our letter requests the recipients do their jobs and conduct voter fraud and election theft hearings and investigations so that congressmen and senators will be better informed when Congress faces questions about the legitimacy of various federal elections held on November 3rd. And so in the House of Representatives, we see this kind of every year. You know, one of the members in the House objects to this stuff. In 2016, when Trump won, it was Maxine Waters from California who was contesting that. She was in the House, on the House floor, waving her written objection around, saying, is there any senator who's willing to join me? Of course, there wasn't anybody, and so that didn't go anywhere. So the question here, it looks like in the House this cycle, we've got a lot of people who are at least asking questions. We've got 18 members from the House of Representatives who want to challenge this stuff, and they still need somebody from the Senate. They still need somebody in the other chamber of Congress to raise their hand and join them in their objections. And yesterday, there was some indication that there might be somebody. Many people have been speculating this might be Rand Paul. Rand Paul, at the hearing there was a Senate hearing for the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, had a hearing, I think it was Wednesday, and he was pretty aggressive with his line of questioning, at least as it related to Christopher Krebs. Rand Paul was saying, there was fraud everywhere, my friend. It may not be what we're talking about here. It may not be, Dominion software being manipulated and hacked, but he's talking about all of the other rule changes at the last minute and all of the other sort of irregularities that we saw around the country in response to COVID-19 changing the rules of the election. So many people were saying maybe it's Rand Paul who's going to be willing to join the House of Representatives to contest this stuff, but he hasn't made a statement either way. Yesterday, we got a post from a woman named Lauren Windsor who said that defying McConnell, Senator-elect Tuberville suggests he will challenge the Electoral College while stumping in Georgia. And so remember, the new House and the new Senate, they take office on January 6th, even though the president doesn't take office until January 20th. And this is so that when the votes are counted, they're counted under the new Congress. They're counted under the new House and the new Senate. So this guy just got elected. He's going to be in the Senate. And yesterday, according to Lauren Windsor, he was sort of toying around with the idea of maybe joining in the House objection. So this is what he had to say. My understanding is this was actually a secretly recorded video. He was giving a speech. Somebody was recording him. They probably shouldn't have been recording him according to the rules of the event, but they did, and this leaked. And so this is what he said yesterday.
Folks, we got to grab a hold and hold on. We have no choice. Listen to me now. We have no choice but to win this election. They're going to try to steal it. They're going to try to buy it. They're going to do everything they can, lie, cheat, steal to win this election, like they did in the presidential election. It's impossible. It is impossible what happened. But we're going to get that all corrected. I'm going to tell you, don't give up on it.
Are you going to fight to make this election right?
Pardon?
Are you going to fight to make this election right?
We're going to fight hard.
What can y'all do on January 6th? Madison said y'all had tricks up your sleeve.
We're going to run to it at the airport. We got to get
Just wait. You see what's coming. You've been reading about it in the House.
The Democrats are not going to.
And we're going to have to do it in the Senate.
I'm sorry.
All right, so he said, well, you see what's happening in the House. So he's walking away. Somebody's asking him a question, and they say, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to fight? And he says, well, you kind of see what's going on here. You see what's going on in the House, and that means we're going to have to do the same thing in the Senate. So people just kind of jumped and said, oh, there it is, right? Now we've got one senator who's going to join the House of Representatives, Mo Brooks or somebody over there, and they're going to object to the counting of the electoral votes. That would be a big deal. That would cause both houses to be forced to debate. They'd have to separate. They'd have their conversations about what they want to do as individual houses. If they reconvene and they agree after a floor vote, so let's say in the Senate, you've got 51-49, the Republicans want to do that. In the House, maybe if the Republicans were successful, remember the House is a lot redder. It's going to be a lot redder on January 6th than it is currently because during this election, the Republicans won a ton of seats. They won seats everywhere across the country. There was this red wave that took place that swept a bunch of Republicans into power, but somehow didn't encompass Donald Trump. Many people are scratching their heads about that. But so now we have a redder Congress, and the Republicans, if they were able to peel off a couple of, let's say, middle of the road, more independent, more Democrats from some red states, they may be able even though the Democrats control the House of Representatives, they may be able to win a floor vote, right? I think it's a long shot for that reason. Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats, they fall in line every single time. So are they going to be able to flip anybody? I don't know. Probably not, but maybe. And if they do, then those votes could get thrown out. So people see that as a pathway. Now, Tuberville made that statement yesterday, and then today kind of is walking that back a little bit. Tuberville says, according to this article from Yellowhammer News, said, and they had an exclusive interview with him, a phone interview happened yesterday. He said that he's doing due diligence before making a decision on a congressional challenge to electoral votes. The effort that is being led by Mo Brooks, who we just heard from, says the formal support, we heard from Tuberville, but Mo Brooks was the one who drafted the letter. The formal support of at least one senator is still needed to force a floor debate and votes by each chamber on the respective states in questions. The electors of each state voted on Monday, and the results would put Joe Biden in office if they're accepted by Congress. So even though the electors voted, Congress still has to accept them. Tuberville's going back on the campaign trail now, traveling across Georgia. He's emphasizing when he was speaking to Yellowhammer News. So even though yesterday he said, we got to do something about this, we're going to do the same thing in the Senate, or we need to do the same thing in the Senate, he's emphasizing here that he has not made up his mind on whether he will support the congressional challenge. He outlined that he will be doing his, quote, due diligence, studying the issue and soliciting feedback from his constituents before taking a stance. I want to do what's best for President Trump, he says, and the people of Alabama and the people of this country. He says that the majority of what he is hearing is people are concerned about alleged voter fraud during the 2020 election, and says, I'll probably meet with Mo Brooks and get his side of it. He's going to continue with his due diligence, which is to be conducted through Christmas. So a lot of the holiday excuses coming up from a lot of people trying to just kick that can down the road a little bit. He finishes the article. He says the Republican stated that many people, including him, generally want to see the election process cleaned up and corruption rooted out across the nation. Said Alabama election officials always did and do a great job. Tuberville says he wants to review all of the relevant evidence that would support those charges, and he subsequently refuted the assertion in the activist's original tweet saying that he was taking an oppositional stance to the Senate Majority Leader. He says people take stuff out of context. He says, I quote, I will make a decision pretty soon, but I'm going to get all of the information before doing so. I haven't done any background work yet. I want to know about it first. Mine will be an answer for the people of our state and our country, not for any media people out there. We're going to do what's right. So that is Tuberville. Now, this type of political posturing, non-answers, kick the can down the road is something we're very familiar with. Is he going to do anything? I don't know. Based on this statement, I probably would guess not. And we've seen that, I think, with some of the Senate candidates out of Georgia as well. This is becoming a bit of a wedge issue, and this can go a couple different ways. This could backfire a little bit. If the people in Georgia don't want this to happen, they may not turn out to vote to put those senators in office. If they want that, this could be a major landslide for them, right? The people of Georgia might go out and confirm those two senators running in the special election. We'll see what happens with that. Let's take a look at some of the super chats. We got several from Wolfgang Deo. As always, we have Wolfgang Deo, who says, they are turning the frogs gay. Hi, Rob. Hi, Faith. Did you see the fainting vaccinated nurse video? I did there, Wolfgang. I saw that. And, I didn't think that was probably a result of the vaccine. I think that was probably a result of her having to speak to the media, a lot of cameras, a lot of lights around. She probably is not used to that situation. High stakes, high stress. Looked like a regular faint to me. I'm not sure that, getting injected with the vaccine will knock you on the ground like that. My understanding is from the news articles, she's alive and well and doing okay. I think it was just an anxiety thing. Many people are used to that. He also says, are the electoral votes from Greenland coming in? I have not seen them yet. And he says that Kenny B, yes, but this attack succeeded bigly. And so I think that is this next quote. Kenny B says, I love the legal analysis, but stop fear-mongering. Nuke weapons labs always under attack and occasionally intrusions occur. Cyber professionals well-equipped to handle it and secure sensitive information. So I hope that's true. I certainly hope that's true. Haven't gotten a lot of confidence out of our government thus far about that issue. I'm hoping that you're right. Hopefully you're exactly right, but I think it's reasonable to be concerned when you hear that the government is literally hitting the panic button, and they're also indicating that the nuclear agencies were probably compromised. I think it's reasonable to be a little bit concerned about that. Kenny B says Snowden is a traitor and should be executed for treason. You don't know the extent of his actions. Many lives put in grave danger. He is no different than a criminal vigilante like McMichaels. Well, Kenny B, I have not seen that, my friend. I mean, I've seen a lot of information being released, and from what I read about Snowden, he went through, some pretty good mechanisms to limit the harm and to prevent people from being killed and to protect American interests to some degree. Now, of course, by exposing what the government was doing by gobbling up all of our information in just, barrel loads, I got a lot of issues with that. And I appreciate the fact that Snowden brought that to our attention because we know the government wouldn't do that. So I think, look, the Snowden and the Assange thing, I think people are going to disagree on those two until the end of time. But if the decision comes down to more transparency and more accountability, I'm gonna lean in that favor. And I just haven't seen any evidence that Snowden or Assange were individuals who were out there trying to destroy America. I know that was the popular narrative, but I just haven't seen that. We have Shaheen K, who comes in and says, electoral count of 1887 seems to say 2 state slates of electors meet safe harbor, but neither slate counts. Okay, let me read that again. Electoral Count Act of 1887 seems to say if 2 slates of electors meet safe harbor, but House and Senate can't agree, then neither state counts. Okay, so I read it. I'm not sure what the Electoral Count Act of 1887 is. If it's U.S. Code Section 15, we read that on this program, and my understanding of it is that they both have to agree to throw them out. If they disagree, if one house votes yes and the other house votes no, then what happens is they're going to certify the slate of votes that the governor of the state certifies. So again, just think about this sort of as a separation of power thing. The legislature is responsible in the states for conducting the election, even though they really didn't do much of that this year. They've delegated most of that responsibility over to the executive branch, but the Constitution says the legislature can do it. The legislature does it, kind of, even if they delegate it to the executive. So they are responsible for running the elections. The executive certifies the results that is presumably from an election that the legislature gave them authority to manage. And so you have both branches of governments confirming that all worked. The electoral votes are then sent over to the judicial branch. Remember, they have to sign 6 certificates of ascertainment from the electoral votes. One of those of 6 sets goes to the federal district court for that state. And so you've got all 3 branches of government now sort of cooperating with each other. That's how you get all the branches working. On the federal level, if one house votes yes, one house votes no, my reading of the rules says that means that they're going to honor, because there's a disagreement there, they're going to honor the set of electors that is certified by the state's governor. So that's kind of the fail-safe. So now if you have two competing slates of electoral votes, they're going to defer to the one that came from that were certified by the governor. So there's a lot of moving parts here. It's confusing, but we're going to continue to break it down as best we can. Good question. Thanks, Shaheen. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the support. Maricopa County resists to serve federal subpoena audit. That comes from Ron B. Maricopa County resists serving the federal subpoena. I did see that today. The Arizona Senate President Chair Fan and the Judiciary Committee here in the Senate, they wanted to serve some subpoenas on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. My understanding is after about 2 days of hearings, they finished today, and the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 to not do anything with the subpoena. So in other words, they would have to go and file a lawsuit now. They're not going to respond to the subpoena because why would they? That's just what our government does. All right, another one comes over from Shaheen, says, it seems to default to the slates sent by the executive of the state only if neither slate meets safe harbor requirements. Okay, so Shaheen, I'm going to look at that again. Actually, that's a great question because now you're confusing me. It's not good. I got to get unconfused. That's my fault, not yours. I'll look at that again, and we'll revisit that. We're going to revisit this stuff a lot, okay, because it's not January 6th yet. We've got a lot to talk about. And as we start to learn more about these processes, we will discuss them on the show. Thanks for bringing that up, though. I will seriously look at that. It's a good question. Wolfgang Deo in the house says, Kenny B, Snowden is like me, so pardon him. By the way, Rob, which user are you in the Discord? I tried DMing you yesterday. It's my name, Robert Gruler, ESQ. Sometimes I'll respond and see them. Sometimes I won't, Wolfgang. Sometimes I'll get to them. Sometimes I won't. So I'll take a look. He says, I think this started in March because that was when they first started noticing it because they needed to secure vaccine research and everything. Wait, was there ballot stuffing in the Weimar Republic? All those 3 questions from Wolfgang Deo. We got a big super chat coming in from Husker Mike. Says, I really enjoy watching your show. Streaming technology is very powerful. Glad to see people like yourself harnessing it to the best way possible. You are making YouTube great again. Thanks, Husker Mike. I do appreciate that. I encourage a lot of people to do more of this type of stuff. I encourage all my lawyer friends. We have another attorney here who wants to guest host this program. I said, heck yeah, come on in, man. Come do it. Right? We want more vocality. We want more people speaking up because I think largely people are scared, and for good reason. This is a lot. There's a lot of vulnerability out there in taking a stand, and I think here what we're doing is just it's kind of vanilla stuff. It's kind of analyzing some of the news, talking about some of the legal issues, and having some fun. But it is, I think, important that more people are having these conversations, not less of them. For some reason, there's this concerted effort to stop people from talking about these issues. I think that's worse for the country, not better. And I appreciate your support, Husker Mike. And, if you have I'm not sure if Husker Mike has a channel over there, but Husker Mike, if you're doing the same thing, if you're doing some streaming, go check out his channel. Thanks for the support. We have some other questions coming in from Newbie of Death Reviews Stuff. Says, San Dimas High School football's rules. That's from, what is that, Billy Madison? Grew up on that movie, my friend. I've seen it many, many times. Was it San Dimas? Is that the name of the school? But I know it's High School Football Rules. That was, what was the name of those kids? The O'Doyle brothers? Something like that. Newbie of Death Reviews. I didn't spam emojis. Your chat added the fem symbols. All be careful. Confused girl emoji. We have Demetrius. Thank you for that, Newbie of Death. Check out their channel because they review some stuff over there. Demetrius Parham says certain government actors and Clinton campaign was trying to get us to fight Russia, Syria back in 2016. We shouldn't jump on the idea of Russia. It could have been China, and it's just a diversion. Yeah, and I made this point, Demetrius. I think that if you're capable of putting together such a sophisticated cyber attack, if you have literally the ability to access nuclear, facilities or whatever they got access to, which I think we're still sort of trying to determine what the scope of it is, wouldn't you blame somebody else for it? Wouldn't you connect it to somebody else? Why would you leave a trail that just points right back to Russia? And they all came out and they said it's Russia SVR, right? Which is sort of like a KGB reincarnate. It's like their digital cyber warfare security division in Russia. And so they just come out, these people, and they say, well, from the government, we don't really know what happened here. We had the DOD on. We just played. He was on CBS, Catherine Herridge, and he says, well, we're still doing a damage assessment. We don't have a conclusion as to who did this, who's behind this, who's responsible. But the media is pretty quick to jump right into this is Russians. And if you're Russian and you are hacking our system, do you leave your business card behind the hacking worm that you just installed in the Orion software? Probably not. If you were somebody else doing it, wouldn't you want to point the fingers to somebody else? I think you would. So I would agree with you that we should be skeptical about this and be very, very cognizant of what we're talking about before we make some decisions, because we're talking about a major, major national security breach that every single intelligence community agency that's part of the DNI, they're all on red alert. And before you start throwing around accusations, this is Putin or Russia or whatever, you got to be very clear on what that looks like, because what comes next might be very, very important. We have Kenny B says, the intel community avoids telling politicians anything because they leak and lie for political game. A hack is no different. I would agree with that one, Kenny B. I mean, the politicians, I really have a difficult time naming a particular politician who I would say, that guy has a good grasp on technology. They probably understand how this stuff works. Can you name anybody? Maybe some of the Josh Hawley or some of these sort of younger generation senators, maybe they understand it, but I've seen these senators and these representatives question people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey. They don't know anything about technology. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. So to say that they understand that there was a supply chain hack that infiltrated a DLL file for SolarWinds, which is a piece of hardware that backs up an IT stack, infrastructure for a major corporation. Do they have any idea what any of that stuff means? I'm going to guess not even a little bit. So, some of this stuff, it's hard because as a member of the IC, you have to report back to, the civilian oversight and government bodies that are run by people who have no idea what they're talking about. So I can understand how that interface can be a little bit difficult. But based on what we're seeing, I think this is a very big deal that is going to have some serious ramifications. Oh my goodness, we have Dr. EMB in the house. I haven't seen Dr. EMB in a while. Good to see you, Doc. She says, have a great and restful weekend. Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate that. And thanks for coming back and being a part of the program. I love that you're here, and I want to wish you a very restful and lovely weekend as well. We have another one coming in from David Bowden Dorfer. Says that you are amazing. Well, I feel that way about you, David. Thanks for the support. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for that nice emoji and the support of the show. We have Arrow Data, who says, thank you for your insights and your fair, positive attitude in spite of the difficult issues and situation. I follow you almost every night from Switzerland. Love that. It's always a pleasure. Fascinating times. Happy holidays, and God bless with a rose. That comes from ADO Data. Thank you for that, ADO Data. I appreciate that. I love hearing from other people in other parts of the world. We looked at Switzerland on the map. Doesn't look like you're too impacted by the SolarWinds Orion hack. So hope everything is going well there in Switzerland. And thanks for being here and being part of the program. Tao doesn't have anything to say, but throws in a nice super chat. Thanks, Tao. Appreciate it. We have Ron B, who says, breaking news in Georgia. We got 2 Fulton County election managers fired, Susan Voyales, and another Fulton County manager where they stored Fulton County ballots. I did see that. I didn't read the article. I just read the headline. It doesn't surprise me. If you're in any position, this is something that I think is, people look to firings as like it's evidence of malfeasance. I'm not, in certain situations, I would agree with that. But there are other situations where, if you have an employee who's working for you and they go out and they start bad-mouthing the organization, you have to fire that employee. Like, what else are you supposed to do? Right. And you see this with, I really don't like this, but I can understand the argument. You see this with police officers. In the very rare occasion when a police officer speaks back out against their law enforcement department, they will usually lose their job. And, on one hand, it's like, they shouldn't fire that person. They're speaking truth to power. They have a right to free speech. They have a right to go in and, challenge their government job and all of those things. On the other hand, how can you run an organization if you have your own employees bad-mouthing the organization? It's not good, right? You got to separate yourself from that person. So I can see it on both sides. I think that's sort of applicable to what's happening in Georgia. It could be malfeasance. These people could be whistleblowers and they're firing them because they're, about to unveil a bunch of information, or they could have just said, listen, these are bad employees. They're now bad-mouthing the integrity of our operation. We can't let them continue to be here, and they're fired for that reason. So I can see that one both ways. It's a good point, though. Supernatural 1536 says, maybe this is Biden's plan to lead an effective strategy to mobilize pressure. Oh gosh, I remember that clip. He was trying to say true international diplomatic pressure, something like that, and it came out like pressure. And it reminded me of that scene from Liar Liar. Was that the one where he was in there, trying to sputter out a lie? He can't ever get it out. Pretty funny. Thanks, Supernatural. Thanks for the support. Ron B also says there is news about SCOTUS Chief Justice Roberts and 3 other liberal justices screaming about a Texas lawsuit was filed to their docket. I saw that headline as well. I did see that. I saw that bubbling around yesterday. The idea here was that Chief Justice John Roberts was in chambers, or was in, what the Supreme Court has their meetings in the Supreme Court building, and was screaming at the other justices about whether or not to accept a writ of certiorari on the Texas lawsuit. So remember, Texas was suing Pennsylvania for election problems. It went to the Supreme Court. It was ultimately turned down. They didn't hear the case. And so I think it was another congressperson from Texas was in front of some sort of oversight committee. I think it was a legislative hearing, and he was talking about overhearing this profanity-laced, expletive-filled, tirade from Chief Justice Roberts towards the other justices, telling them that if they accept this case, if they hear it, they're going to be the ones responsible for riots around the United States. And, that one just didn't feel right to me. It felt a little bit out of character for what I envisioned the Supreme Court justices to be. To me, it sounds like that would be a tyrannical Chief Justice screaming at subordinates. And, the Chief Justice is the Chief Justice, but the other judges have tenure, and they're all pretty hard people. I mean, they have lifetime appointments. They're not going anywhere. And so, is Clarence Thomas going to sit there and get berated at, get screamed at by John Roberts? I don't think so. Same with Amy Coney Barrett. Same with Gorsuch. Any of them, even the left-wing judges. I don't think that they're going to be taking that type of abuse. I just don't see that as something that seemed realistic to me. And then there was some sort of debunking of those claims that came out and said, well, they're not even meeting in person. Everything has been done over Zoom. And so I can kind of see this both ways. Yes, they're doing their oral arguments. They're not meeting in person. They're trying to do their social distancing. Remember, many of these people are old. They cannot get COVID. They cannot die because it's a huge thing when a Supreme Court judge dies. The whole country stops. And, we want to make sure they are hyper quarantined and their health is top priority, probably on par with the president. And so the idea here that they are socially distanced, I understand that, and I can see that as a justification to explain why this yelling situation didn't happen. By contrast, presumably they all still have offices. Presumably, like everybody else, they're going into their offices, they're doing their work. They're not, I would say, quarantined in their home. So if they went into the SCOTUS building and had these meetings, you could see why they could do that and why that yelling thing may have happened. But I'm a little bit skeptical of it. I just don't think it's sort of in character for the judges. I'm sure things get heated, but I can't envision them doing that. And I've watched a lot of all of them. It just doesn't seem like it fits to me. I think that a better reason or better explanation for why John Roberts didn't accept the case or why they didn't grant a writ of certiorari is because it's just a political issue. It's a political question. These are people who are thinking about policy. They're not thinking about the Constitution. They're thinking about riots and legitimacy. Remember, we've talked about the Supreme Court and legitimacy a lot on this channel, detailing that the court gets its power from public perception. And if the court does something that goes against public perception, the court loses a lot of its legitimacy and therefore loses a lot of its power. And so they didn't want to step in any of this. So it was a political decision more than it was anything. And you don't need to scream at each other to come to that conclusion. I think that was the basis for not granting certiorari. Long tangent on that, but good question. Thanks, Ron B. We have Kenny 1B who says saying nuclear codes are compromised is like saying your 67 Chevy is compromised. Makes no sense. So Kenny, I'll have to take your word for it on that one, my friend. I am not a nuclear security expert. All I can tell you is what I am seeing from the DOD and from all of these different intelligence agencies and all of the experts out there saying this is a big deal. I don't know if this means that they can go and take a nuclear bomb and do something with it. I'm going to guess probably not. I'm going to guess that our security system, our national security infrastructure is resilient enough to deal with this. By talking about it, I'm not trying to freak people out and think that you're going to be waking up to a nuclear fireball tomorrow morning. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying this is a big deal, and I think that is pretty much warranted from what we are seeing thus far. If that changes, I'll come back out there and correct the record on that, but it's interesting at least. Can we agree on that? Thanks for the support there, Kenny B. Appreciate it. We have Suki who says, where is Ted Cruz? What a big talker. Disgusting. I don't know where Ted Cruz is. Miss Love, I don't know. I think that wasn't he on the floor of the Senate today? I saw something from him, but I don't know what he's going to be doing. Is he going to join? Maybe your question is about, is he going to join somebody in the House of Representatives? I don't think so. Ted Cruz has presidential ambitions, and I think even that heat is a little too much for him. And I also think that, look, all of these politicians, all of these senators, by the way, they all want to be president. Okay, you have to understand that. They're not going to just go in there and throw away their political career if they think that it doesn't serve them. If they think that there's a path forward to them getting reelected by joining the House and objecting to the votes, they'll do it. But if they think that that would jeopardize reelection or it would jeopardize their ability to go and run for higher office or to be appointed into some administration, in other words, if it makes them too toxic, they're not going to do it. Because even though it might be the right thing to do, they have bigger aspirations. They are politicians after all. So is Ted Cruz, he's going to run for president at some point again. Is he going to do that if that might be off-putting to some maybe middle-of-the-road Americans? My guess is no. So he can talk a big game, but when push comes to shove, I don't think he's going to do much of anything. Same with a lot of the other senators. Maybe absent Rand Paul. We'll see. We have Newbie of Death says, thanks again for another great show. Thank you, Newbie of Death. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here on this Friday evening. Happy that you're here and appreciate the support. We have Curtis Bartle says, thanks for great reporting. Cheers, my friend. We got a cheers emoji. Cheers on that. I'll take a little sip here. Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Parched a little bit, but we're rehydrating that palate. We have Frank Apt, who doesn't have a chat, but just says, doesn't have a question, just says, ha, ha, ha. Thanks, Frank Apt. I appreciate you being here. We have another one from Wolfgang Deo says, what if all of our procedures do not match law? Well, that's kind of what we were looking at. That's kind of what a lot of this election litigation has been about. We've really been talking about the executive branch in many of these states, or the judicial branches of many of these states, just changing the rules outside of the law. Remember, we talked about this in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court just changed the election deadline in the pre-election litigation. They just said, okay, well, we're going to move it from November 3rd to November 6th. When lawsuits were filed to object to that change, went all the way up to the Supreme Court. John Roberts joins with the liberals, sent it back down, upheld that lower court ruling. So they just changed the rules, literally on their own. How can they do that when they're not a legislative branch? That's weird. It seems to me like they're operating outside of the rules. But the Supreme Court didn't give us any guidance. They just said, that's fine. Not a big deal. We have S. Love again says, what recourse is left for Americans when elected officials fail us? I stand with defunding them. IRS couldn't handle 74 million not paying taxes. We need to stop being afraid. It's the same as these politicians if we do nothing. So love the passion, S. Love. I appreciate that. You know, I think we talked about a little bit about this not paying taxes thing yesterday. Death and taxes are the only two things that are certain in this world. I am not a fan of taxes at all. I think it's mostly theft. I think that when you think about what you do with your life, you trade your life and your time for money. That's what you do, right? You work, you take your efforts and your productivity, and you mix that with some resources in this world, and you turn that into money. You provide value to other people. That value is translated into currency, which you take. When the government takes away 30% of that, 50% of that in some states, I think California, if you're in a certain bracket, it's like 55%. That's why Joe Rogan left, Elon Musk left. They're all leaving because they're stealing your money, which is your livelihood. You're taking your time, you're mixing it with energy and property, and you're turning that into value. The government is taking half of it away. I'm not a fan of taxes because I feel like they're stealing our lives from us. It's not okay. But we all got to pay a little bit of it. And the IRS has a lot of tools and mechanisms to enforce that, including throwing you in jail if you don't. Now, if 74 million people didn't want to pay taxes, I think I would find good company in that. But we're going to, I don't know that that would be enough to topple the government. I'm not sure that that's what we want anyways. I think the better answer here is to act locally. Stop worrying so much about the president who's thousands of miles away from most of the country. Stop worrying about your senator who doesn't care about anything else other than getting an appointment in the next administration or becoming president themselves. Act locally. Make sure that in your county, the people who are running for your local state senate, your local state legislature, whatever that is, they have your ear and you have them on the horn, and you're making sure that whoever's running for office is going to make electoral reform or, let's say election transparency, accountability, opening up the books, enter into contracts with third parties who want to run the election, that make sure that they are open and transparent. Why can Dominion and all these different places, sort of refuse to give access to certain things? If they want to refuse access, they don't get a contract next time. I think that's pretty reasonable. And how that starts is down at the local level, not with the federal IRS. It happens locally at your state. But I understand your frustration and I agree with it. Thank you, S. Love. We have Hidden Prophet who says, I must say that what is happening now will be a blockbuster movie in 10 years from now. Keep up the great work. I know it feels like that, doesn't it? It's wild. This election litigation, I think, is extremely interesting. But when you couple it with everything else that's going on in the world, with a global infrastructure security hack, with a global pandemic, with everything else in the world, you're right. It could be a good movie. And if you put who's the guy who does Michael Bay, explosions everywhere. Hopefully we can avoid that this time. We'll save that for the movie. No more explosions or space aliens. Hopefully we can avoid that. But 2020 is not over yet, so don't hold your breath. All right. We have F the Magician who says, would charging one of the higher profile witnesses with perjury be a good way to get evidence of fraud heard by a court? So now we're talking about a little bit of a different ballgame here, F the Magician. Would charging one of the higher profile witnesses with perjury be a good way to get evidence of fraud heard by a court? So I'd have to speculate on what type of high profile witness you're talking about. If you're saying, so let's take a general witness at a legislative hearing. If you wanted to charge that person with perjury, then that person would be offered as a witness to support the Trump claim that there was electoral fraud. So if you charge that individual with perjury, then that would just be a crime of lying to a legislature or to a court, and that would be a separate crime. It'd go through the criminal process. So it wouldn't get any evidence in that path in front of the court about the actual election. So what you would need to do then is find, like, the Department of Justice, Bill Barr. I think he's leaving on the 28th or the 24th, 23rd, leaving very soon. But the Department of Justice would have to prosecute somebody for electoral fraud. That would be a different system. So right now the election litigation is taking place in civil court, not criminal court. But if Attorney General Barr or a state prosecutor or a county prosecutor or whatever, if they find some evidence of concrete electoral fraud and they charge that person with a crime, yeah, that's going to get evidence in front of a court. You're going to have a lot of discovery. You're going to see what the government has against that individual because they're charging them with a crime. And so presumably, a lot of that stuff is going to be public record and you can see it. And then a court would have to deal with that because a person has been charged with a crime and the government is bringing that case. It hasn't been the opposite of that thus far. The government is not bringing any cases. The government is defending against all the cases. Private individuals are the ones bringing the charges or bringing the claims. They're not criminal charges, they're civil charges, and the courts have been dismissing them because they're finding they have no standing. They have no basis to bring the lawsuit. But when you're charged with a crime, now it's the government coming against you, not the reverse. And so the courts just can't dismiss it because the person who's been charged with a crime has to have their due process. They have to have their day in court. They have to be heard. And in that process, we would see a lot of evidence come out. But we don't have any prosecutors who are willing to prosecute anybody. We're going to see if that changes anytime soon. We have Wolfgang Deo, who says easy for the CCP, North Korea, Iran to VPN through Russia. Yeah, a VPN, a virtual private network, so they can just kind of, make it look like they came from somewhere. I would imagine they're not using, one of the third-party VPNs. They're probably using something a little bit more sophisticated. We have Kenneth Fielder, who says, Bill and Ted, Krebs said most secure. That is concerning. And Krebs did say that, right? He said we should be giving ourselves a little pat on the back. We should be doing a victory lap because this was the most secure election ever. Literally was testifying about that yesterday as the national security infrastructure was being exposed around the world. So kind of a mismatch there, saying it's the most secure election ever. The DOD, FBI, CISA, the very agency that he left, is coming out and saying we have a cybersecurity catastrophe on our hands. So, those things just don't match. But that's what happens when you have congressional hearings and nobody knows what they're talking about. Wolfgang Deo with another one says, the military badmouths the organization every day. I don't need sex because the government screws me every day. Paperclip. Yeah. That's a Wolfgang one. Thanks, Wolfgang. Appreciate it. We have Jenny Wren, who says, Greg Kelly reports game-changing information coming in the next couple of days. Yeah, I think there's probably going to be a lot of that. And we don't know what it looks like. Right now, to me, it feels like, just monitoring kind of everything that's going on, it feels like a lot of people in the government are scrambling to come up with some answers in some regard to something. Don't know what it is yet, but I do agree. I don't know who Greg Kelly is, but I am very certain that the next couple of weeks are going to be jam-packed with stuff to talk about, and we will do that. Ed says, great question. I had a feeling this was going to come up at some point. Will you get the vaccine? So, Ed, I don't know on that one yet. I don't have a good answer for you because I haven't quite decided. I've seen a lot of scary things about it. I've seen a lot of not scary things about it. And what I'll probably do is talk to my doctor about it. Wait a little bit. I'm not somebody who's necessarily high risk. I think I may have already had it. I don't know. I never, got the antibody test or anything like that. I'm taking a lot of precautions. I think I'm very healthy. I exercise. I eat well. I don't have any comorbidities or anything like that. If I got COVID, I think it's probably going to be a blip, hopefully, knock on wood. But, I don't know yet. But I will probably just have the conversation with my doctor. My doctor has been working with me most of my life since I was probably 12. He knows me very well, inside and out, unfortunately. That was weird. But this is one of those things that, I'll have a conversation with him. I'll make a reasonable estimation on my risk factor versus the risk factor of the vaccine. I don't think that I need it. I'm not in a rush to go make a decision on that one way or the other. But don't have an answer on that. I will let you know. All right, Ed, thanks for that. We have Tonka Tuff says, what about the tapes of the justices saying they would do everything to keep Trump from getting reelected in the Supreme Court? Tonka, we sort of answered that on a prior question. I was a little bit skeptical of the claim. I'm not real sure that that conversation did happen. I think there's a lot of alternative explanations for why the Supreme Court didn't want to hear the case. I don't think it was probably as toxic of a conversation as we heard. It could have been, but I think that largely it was a political denial of the case through and through. Whether Judge Roberts was screaming doesn't really matter. It was a political decision, and that's it. That's the end of the story. If he screamed, it makes it a little bit more interesting, but it's the same outcome one way or the other. They didn't hear it. I think that the standing argument was, I mean, you could technically say that's true, but also the Supreme Court, your job is to help us settle these things. This is the time for you to act. This is where your money gets made. This is the whole point of the existence of the court. They just dumped it out. So I think it was all political. Whether he was screaming or not is inconsequential. John Sullivan says, can we impeach a judge? There are few that need it. Yeah, John, you can. The Constitution is a little bit vague on that for the Supreme Court. It says that a judge can keep their tenure as long as they are on good behavior. Okay, so if they're on bad behavior, presumably they can be removed from office. And so you go through a formal impeachment process, just like you would for any other politician, remove them from office. So, it would have to be something pretty significant, because it would be the same impeachment process that you'd go through ordinarily. And in order to remove somebody, you need 2/3 of the Senate, which is a big number. And I don't think you'd ever get that. We have S. Love, who says, I think it would be political suicide if 74 million Republicans won't vote for a rhino that doesn't stand up. No, I think it would be political suicide if 74 million Republicans won't vote for a rhino that doesn't stand up now. No. Yeah, I think what you're talking about is, maybe okay, so I understand what you're saying. Yeah, 74 million Republicans will not vote for a Republican in name only if they don't stand up now. Yeah, I can understand your position on that. So now you're saying, S. Love, that this would be something like if Ted Cruz, to sort of piggyback off the prior question, if Ted Cruz doesn't stand up and do something, that might hurt him more than it would if he didn't stand up. And I can see that. I mean, there are a lot of very, very angry, disaffected Trump people out there. And if Ted Cruz, let's say, for example, Ted Cruz doesn't take action this go round and another senator does, well, now let's say we have the Republican primaries and it's going to be full of Trump supporters, and one senator did object, one senator didn't object. This could be sort of like if we want to analogize this back to a different election, this would be the difference between a Barack Obama and a Hillary Clinton. Remember, they were opponents in the primary in 2008. And one of the major distinguishing factors or features between these two candidates, one was that Hillary voted for the Iraq War. Obama did not vote for the Iraq War. So that was sort of that threshold issues for many voters in the Democratic primaries. They said, Hillary, you're a warmonger. You voted for the war, and that's it. We don't like you. So they voted for Barack Obama. Now, this could be the same type of issue for the Republicans in the Republican primary. If they go in and one voted to object to a fraudulent election and somebody else didn't, who's going to win the primary? So even though that may be better for a senator who's trying to win a general election, remember, after the primaries are won, everybody races to the center. They'll be very conservative, very Republican during the primaries, but as soon as they win the primary, both sides run to the center and suddenly they try to moderate. And, the idea that you did not support a challenge to counting the electoral votes might be toxic during a primary. It may be very beneficial for you during a general. And so there's a lot of politics that are going to be thought through over these next couple of weeks until we get to January 6th. Thanks, S. Love. Appreciate it. We have Wolfgang who says, 8 is a lucky number to the Japanese, and a text slang of theirs is 88 for applause. Bachi bachi. And Iran wants nuclear lab stuff, not codes. Yeah, this whole thing, speaking of Iran, we were talking about this. Iran was sort of the subject of another major cybersecurity hack. You remember this was during the Stuxnet era. Remember the Stuxnet virus? Iran was building these nuclear centrifuges in order to distill a lot of the uranium, the fusion material that they needed. And suddenly it was weird. Their centrifuges kept exploding. They kept breaking. Everything kept, falling apart. Well, we learned that what happened was the Israelis, and I think it was also the U.S. I don't know that any of this has been confirmed, but it's highly speculative, that they were implanting chips. They were sabotaging the equipment in a supply chain attack, just like this Orion attack, and they were literally building faulty equipment into the Iranian centrifuges, and they were just pressing buttons every time they started to spin up these nuclear facilities, and they would break down. Kind of, and that's a big deal, right? That's a nuclear security facility that third-party external sources are getting in there and they're interfering with those things. So this is not unprecedented. It's just much bigger. It's something that is so much more widespread, and it's happening to the United States, not to Iran. We have a lot more capabilities than the Iranians do. So we know that this type of stuff happens. We just don't know the extent of how it's happening here in the United States. Thank you, Wolfgang, for that. We have Denise Rosselek, who says nothing, but has a nice super chat. Thanks, Denise. Appreciate the support. We have another one from Cheryl Myers, who said, Trump needs to declassify Area 51 so we have something else to worry about besides elections and COVID. Yeah, I'd love that. I've always had a fascination with space and aliens and planets and stardust and all that stuff. I really do want to know what's going on in Area 51. I really, really do. If I had to choose, let's say between, maybe this is a no-brainer, but like the JFK classified information or Area 51, not even close. It's Area 51 all the way. I would like a personal tour there one day, maybe when I run for president and get elected. All right. So we have Ron B, who says, well, you ain't going to get 74 million Americans to vote for you for president, especially, there are a lot of irregularities. Yeah, I think that sentiment is shared by many. This idea here is that nobody really has a lot of faith in the elections anymore, which is really, really problematic. If you're a Democrat, you think they're great, I guess, even though there's a lot of media clips out there that show that before the election, they were all super freaked out about fraud and electoral fraud and absentee voting and all of those things. And then suddenly, since their guy won, those concerns evaporate right out the window. Not a big deal anymore. Hidden Prophet says, actually, you would have to put aliens in the movie, considering that the U.S. military did disclose UFOs. Blockbuster 2030. Yeah, more aliens. They kind of did, right? They said that there were some UFOs. There was the guy, he was a Navy pilot. He was on the Joe Rogan show. And he's talking about this pill-shaped vessel that is just zipping all over the place. The U.S. Air Force can't keep up with it. And the U.S. military came out and said, yeah, there are UFOs. There are things flying around the country or around the world that we don't know what they are. They're unidentified. It's an unidentified flying object. Whether it's aliens or not, I don't know. We have another one from S. Love, who says, this is just for you, your crew, and all you do. You're amazing. Thank you. Keep up the good work. That comes from S. Love. And so talking about the crew, I think she's talking about Miss Faith back there. And then, of course, we have Ma, our very lovely moderator who helps keep things under control. And thanks, S. Love. We all very much appreciate that. Thanks so much for being here. A couple more from Wolfgang, who says, Wolfgang Deo, 2020, 12, 18, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 equals 8.88. Oh, my goodness. And then we have S. Love saying, ha, 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 Wolfgang, funny. So, I think Wolfgang might be like the Zodiac killer, closely related to Ted Cruz. We're seeing some interesting things come together. We're seeing some pins on the wall with different maps and strings kind of crisscrossing all over the place. So be careful out there. All right, we have Becky Faye, who says, also, it happened on his watch. Greg Kelly is on Newsmax. All right, I'll take a look over there. Yeah, there's a lot going on. And it's weird. You're sort of noticing these two realities that we're living in. You have one side that says, well, there's a lot of problems with the election. There's a lot of security concerns happening around the world. There's a lot of things that we should be questioning. On the other side, it's just everything's good. Everything's fine and normal. In the other side, they're talking about COVID still. There are a lot of COVID deaths and, COVID. But everything else is good. Pete Buttigieg is going to be the transportation secretary, even though nobody has any idea what the hell he knows about transportation, but He's going to be the transportation secretary. So, they're just talking about those things, sitting around the water cooler saying, gosh, isn't it going to be great when Pete just makes our subways just beautiful again? He's going to make subways beautiful again. It's going to be good for America. All right. We've got LD 2020 who says, is it noteworthy that Durham and Powell have military law experience and that Rosen has judicial administrative experience? I don't think so. I think the question is really getting at the military law component here, sort of hinting that maybe these operators have some familiarity with how the military might work or how the military might interface with some of these ongoing issues. I'm not a proponent of getting the military involved in this stuff. I think these are civilian issues. I am not a fan of government intrusion. I think that a military intruding onto our civil society would be a big problem. I know a lot of people out there are advocating for that. I do not see how that works out well for anybody. I think that as an American people, we can exercise our vote and our frustration by voting. And I mean that, by voting. And I know many people say that's insane because this election was stolen. Well, it has to happen at a local level. I mean, you can't, what we saw here was a lot of top of the line ballots that were sort of empty at the lower level races. So remember, many of the ballots that are alleged to have been fraudulent, the absentee ballots, the voting by mail ballots, all those things, they had a selection for the president, but all of the down ballot races were left blank because they know that if you fraudulently falsify a bunch of ballots and the down ballot races, they're going to notice that because those margins are much smaller. So so I think that there's still election integrity locally, and that's where we need to refocus our efforts. And so the next candidate that hasn't said that they're going to get into office and look at this stuff and make some reasonable reforms, those types of individuals have to go. And that's where I'd like to see this go. The fact that Durham, Powell, Rosen, that they've got some administrative law or some military law, I think that's, it's a good tool to add to your skill set if you're an attorney, but I'm hopeful that doesn't mean that they're going to try to use or do something with that military law by bringing it into our civilian life. I just wouldn't be comfortable with that. We also have another one from Lady Babylon, who says this cyber attack isn't about the nukes, it's about our power grid, which is extremely vulnerable, pretty much a perfect target. Fun times ahead. Yeah, I think that is probably reasonable. I think that a lot of our infrastructure, here's my thought on it. If they did something so terrible like that, like if this was not a terrorist attack, if this were not if a nation state was responsible for taking out our electricity grid or taking out our financial systems or jeopardizing our nuclear capabilities or doing anything to that effect, that would certainly be an act of war. And I think the United States would respond in kind. So what I would suspect here is that this is sort of a soft war. They wouldn't be using their access to wipe out entire grids because that would be very, very problematic. We'd notice that, and the American people would demand a response. And so even if some of our national infrastructure is jeopardized, I'm pretty sure we can figure out how to respond without it. We just use landlines or we'd send faxes or whatever we need to do in order to coordinate. But the American military would figure it out. And if it's one nation state that does something so catastrophic to the infrastructure of the U.S., there would be a response in kind, as there should be. And I don't think that anybody in the world really wants that. So the better strategy, if you are trying to mess with the United States, is to it's like death by 1,000 cuts. You infiltrate all of the systems, you stay there for a long period of time, you just start setting things off, kind of like what they did with Stuxnet and the Iranian centrifuges, just kind of enough to be a thorn in your side, to stop things on a tactical level, to stop a certain trade deal from happening, or to undermine, peace talks somewhere because you don't like what that peace talk is going to result in for your nation. And so you start leaking data, or you provide the opposition party with information they shouldn't have. You do those types of things so that you always maintain a little bit of a strategic advantage, but you don't jeopardize the nations to the point that demands a serious response back. I think that's kind of what this would be. I mean, if I were Putin or Xi or any one of these world leaders, I think that would be the better strategy. Rich Lawrence says, Rob, in the event of the election overturning via a contingent election, what happens to the down ballot in your expertise? Senate races, local, etc. Is there an overturn by the court? Same question. In the event of an election overturning, okay, so So it would only be for the presidency and the vice presidency. Good question, Rich Lawrence. So he's asking, what happens if there is a contingent election in the House of Representatives? So what happens there, the House selects the president, the Senate selects the vice president. So all of those other down ballot races, those are all basically, state-ish races. They're for federal offices, but they're run by the state. And so they can decide as a state who they want to nominate for that position. So, Arizona, if there was a contingent election in the United States House of Representatives for the president, it wouldn't affect our senators. So it wouldn't affect Mark Kelly. It wouldn't affect, Kyrsten Sinema or any of those people. It would only, the House of Representatives decides the president, the Senate decides the vice president, and that's it. All of the other down ballot races have already been decided by the state elections. Good question. All right, we have Becky Faye who says, in the movie, who would play Trump? Well, that's a good question. Who would play Trump? What actor could we get to play Trump? I don't know. Is there anybody you can think of? I can't think of anybody. I think it's a good question. We'll have to revisit that. Thanks, Becky. Maybe you'll have some suggestions. We have some other ones coming in. We have Jenny Wren who says Rob for president. That's funny. Oh, we got a couple of those. Okay, that's funny. Thanks everybody. Maybe one day in the far distant future, in a far away galaxy, in an alternate reality, that would be something that would be possible. We have another one. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the love. Thank you for that. Look, you're making me blush. Cool down. All right. We have Brian Reinhardt who says, California ballots printed in violation of state law. The law says ballots cannot be counted and are invalid. California's 55 electoral votes cannot be cast by law. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I appreciate that. Brian Reinhardt says that there is a violation of state law, which is true. I think there were violations of state laws around the country. California is probably one of 50 states that all had violations of their election laws, but the courts don't care. Prosecutors don't care. Supreme Court doesn't care. Federal courts don't care. State courts don't care. State Supreme Courts don't care. Nobody cares. It's just the way that it is. And largely it's been because of COVID. Oh, we had to, everybody's freaking out. We have to change the rules because we are so incompetent that we can't manage two things at once. We can't vote and protect our health and safety. We can't do that apparently. So we got to change everything, even though it's not so good. Nobody cares. I understand it. Somebody should file a lawsuit about California's 55 electoral votes. But if they did, the only thing that would happen would be a judge dismisses it and says, thanks for wasting our time. We have another one coming in from Map Maker Jenny. Says, thanks for laying this all out in simple terms. It's refreshing to come here and get an unbiased review of the current events. Thanks, Map Maker Jenny. I do, some of my bias does slip through. I appreciate that. I appreciate the support. I am trying to, I try to lay out the facts and then provide some commentary, and I appreciate you being here. And I do try to be unbiased, but apologies if some of that slips through. I got to have some fun too. It's a little bit fun to get a little bit riled up. So thanks, Jenny. I appreciate that. Map Maker Jenny, check her out. We have Curtis Bartle who says, if martial law was called, can it just be for some states but not all? Good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm not real familiar with martial law. I don't know what that even would entail. I don't like the idea of it. I just think it's mixing, it's bringing the military onto the homeland, which has always felt uncomfortable to me. I don't like the concept of that. So I don't know if they could just go and implement it in one state. I mean, I think individual states could also implement martial law, right? They could also declare martial law. And if that were to be the case, then presumably it would be in that one state. But if the federal government declares martial law, I would imagine that should extend to the entire country, which would be concerning. We have another one from Ron B. Well, got a question for the show. Well, maybe you were looking for doing things for the show. Maybe bring in patrons where you show your fan base. Interesting. Yeah. So I think, Ron, you're asking maybe like a call-in show or, where people can call in or hop on a Zoom or something like that. I thought about doing that on maybe some other platforms. I think Instagram is very good for that. You can have people just kind of come and go, press join. It's very easy and simple. We're sort of exploring some of those options. Also, I'm going to start playing around with going on other shows. So I think we've got something set up with Uncivil Law, and we're going to see if we can maybe do some more of the, conversational stuff, more maybe some, low-level friendly debates and things like that with some other people on YouTube, just so that we can have more in-depth conversations and not me just pontificating at you for 2 hours. People may want a little bit of variety, and so be more than happy to do that. Thanks, Ron B, for the question and the support. We have another great show. Merry Christmas, Rob, Faith, and to all. And for the movie, our last one, for the movie Wolfgang to play Trump, and who does Wolfgang choose to play Vice President? LOL. Wolfgang as Donald Trump. It would be exciting. I would follow that Twitter account, that's for sure. And I think that is all that we have for today, my friends. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program. And a couple other reminders before we wrap up here. I encourage you to subscribe if you're watching this on a replay. If you're not a regular on the channel, we'd love a subscribe. We would really appreciate a like, a thumbs up, a share, invite a friend or a family member or somebody to come on over and join us for the program. We go live every day of the week. We're going to be trying to do that all next week. I got to file a motion with the court of my mother and see if she'll let me live stream on Christmas Day. She's pretty hard. She's a tough judge. Not sure if she's going to allow that, but we're going to see what next week's schedule looks like. I'm going to try to be here for most of it. A couple other reminders. If you would like to join us in the Discord server, the link is in the description. You can come on over there. We chat before and after the show. And all of the slides that we presented today, Miss Faith is going to save those and throw those in the Discord server so that they're available for you if you would like them. There's also a copy of my book, a PDF, in the Discord. It's this book right here. It's called Beginning to Winning: How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. It's got a lot of good information in there. You can see yours truly wrote that this year. It's available on Amazon if you want to buy a hard copy. Otherwise, there's a free copy. Grab it in the Discord server. It is yours. And lastly, but not leastly, I want to thank you for being here. And if what we do on a daily basis here at my law firm, the R&R Law Group, is we help people charged with crimes. That's really what we do. We're boots on the ground. We've got a whole team of people here. We're passionate about it. We love to help good people get through the system and get back on track. And so if you know anybody in the state of Arizona who has been charged with a crime, we would be honored if you trusted us enough to send them to us so that we can help them. We'd very much appreciate it. We offer free case evaluations. And like I said, we're good at what we do. We're very passionate about it. And so we'll make sure they get the best result possible. That's it for me, folks. I want to leave you with that one more reminder to subscribe. We will be back here next week on Monday. It's 5 p.m. Arizona time, which is Mountain Time. It's going to be 4 p.m. on the West Coast. It's going to be 6 p.m. Central Time. And then 7 p.m. it is going to be on the East Coast. And so that's it. I want to wish you all a very warm, very nice weekend. Make sure you're getting a lot of rest, eating some good food. We see you back here on Monday, same time, same place. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.